Let me also share my screen. This is Synchros, but I did want to made a little PowerPoint for you guys, so we might as well go through that. We're talking about Cajun Credit. This is for Casino Queen Hollywood. Thank you again for joining us on this fabulous Friday morning. My name is Alex Neto. I'm a systems training specialist at Konami. Usually we would go around the room and do introductions, but for these remote trainings, I'll just tell you who I am, I guess, and we'll continue. In this case, please, the most important thing I would say is participate and ask questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. I will do my best to answer them. If I do not have the immediate answer, I will go ahead and research that and get the answer back to you. So please use this time to ask questions if you have any. What we're going to be going over, I'm going to show you how to use Synchros, how you would process vouchers in the cage, those Tito tickets from slot machines, how you transfer funds from your main bank to your cage windows, how you perform table games, fills, and credits, issue miscellaneous payouts, check in and out your impresses or pouches, how to use safekeeping. We're going to skip foreign exchange because I don't believe you're utilizing that. I'm showing you how to use the JPCC buy form to help balance your drawer for your cashiers at the end of the shift. Opening and closing repositories if you need to do that. You are on 4.0.10 R2, I believe, so you won't really need to open and close your repositories, but I will show you the form in case you have a one-off repository that you might open for special events. Then we're going to go into credit, the things required to have a patron credit account in Synchros, how to use that, how to issue markers, how to issue and extend the credit through the this trip only function. You guys are going to be using Every for checks, so we will be just kind of glossing over that part, and you will not be cashing payroll checks if I'm not mistaken. And then I'll show you how to use the front money form to take in front money deposits and front money transactions. So if there are no questions on any of that, we're just going to jump into Synchros. This is
Hey,
the Synchro. Yeah.
Alex, can you send me something about how to turn that front money on? Is it just a simple thing as doing it through the rolls, or is it like a DST or something you got to do?
With front money, they just need access to the form. So
Okay.
you should just give them access to here. I'll show you where it is. Synchro start menu button. Let me log in. So this is what it looks like. I'm going to log in with my username. I have admin access, but I just want to show you what, so I have access to all the forms. So they would go to Cajun Vault and then just front money. So for you, Barry, you go to security roles. And you know how it works, right? You go down to Cajun Vault, you look
Oh yeah.
up front
Yeah, I
money,
know how
and
to
then
get
you
it
just
there.
you just check it, and then
Oh, okay, cool.
you can leave the patron agent feature unchecked, Barry, because that's for
Okay.
Australia.
Okay.
And then we have the other FLS unchecked as well.
Okay, cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. So I'm just gonna log out. This is Synchros, guys. Your username when Barry creates the account logins for you, or your IT department creates the account logins, is typically the first letter of your first name, which for me is Alex, and then your full last name, which is Neto. I just hit the tab button, type in my password, and you can either press enter or click on connect. You're going to log in. Just kind of want to briefly go over what you're seeing, how you know you've logged in. Across the top are your global toolbar buttons. The search, reports, this is the button you use to run reports. Our tools button you may not be using because it's enabling your touchscreen keypad. And then we have the history button. This shows you the status messages of Synchros in the lower left-hand corner. I don't know if you saw that, but when we logged in, it said connected to database. So if you're ever running a report or on a form and you get an error and you're not kind of like something's not happening that should be happening, you thought that there was an adjustment made to a patron account, nothing happened, you could easily go to the history button and it will tell you that last status message, if that record was updated or if there was an error or a warning will show up here. And the one on the bottom is the most recent one. So you would just scroll down one on the bottom. You notice I just logged in and we still have all of these messages. That's because Synchro saves all the messages for the application while it was open. So you can log out, log back in, change users, and it will still save those status messages for you. It isn't until you actually close the application that it resets your status messages. Along the bottom, this is very important for you guys in Cage. What you'll have here, this is our test instance name, but you'll see Casino Queen Hollywood. You'll see your username here. You'll see Cage. This is the default form that it, or this is the form that it defaults to. As you're navigating through Synchros, this should change to slots and whatnot. Here, what I was telling you is this is our gaming day, and this is probably the most important part for you guys, as well as the repository that your workstation has associated with it. But if your gaming day is incorrect, you'll want to make sure to notify, or you'll want to have your employees notify you guys and roll that gaming day. You notice we still have it set for yesterday. We did not roll the shift, but if I leave my mouse over it, Synchros does know the actual calendar date and time. So Synchros is aware you just need to go into the system and roll that gaming day or roll that shift. Now, how do we navigate around? We have two other buttons. The star button here is our favorites button. When we pull this up, this is where we can bookmark forms or like web pages, if you will, in Synchros. So if you have a few forms that you're always using, and in the case of your Cage cashiers, it'll probably be the attendant pays bills form because that's where they're going to go to cash Tito tickets. In the case of the workstation that does all the table games, fills and credits, it'll probably be the Chip Bank FC form. So it's just a nice feature that allows you to favorite forms so that you can very quickly hop between them just using your keyboard, and you don't need to use your mouse because I can bring up the favorites menu by just hitting F4 on my keyboard. Next to that, we have our help button, which I'll show you more on later. And you may notice we have the Synchros icon here in the upper left-hand corner. This is kind of like your start menu button in Windows. So if you hit the Synchros icon, now it's going to show you the options to change your password, disconnect, or exit. So if someone has disconnected, you would then hit the Synchro Start menu button, and this will say connect. And this is how you can log back in after someone has logged off a workstation. Or you could hit F9 or F12. Below that, we have all the business areas that we have access to. Again, I currently have admin access, so I have access to pretty much all the forms in Synchros themselves, but your access will vary based on your role. So Director, Cage Manager will have access to more forms and more reports than the Cage Cashier. And Synchros can be set up like that to tailor access to the user itself and their job functions and what they need. So that's a very cool feature of Synchros. Same with the reports. With forms and reports, we can give access on a per user, per role basis, basically. So your employee, you'll assign them the Cage Cashier role, and that Cage Cashier role will have access to specific forms and reports. And that's kind of your basic intro to Synchros. I'll show you how to run reports and use the search function in one moment. So I talked about our main job function is going to be processing those Tito vouchers. Those are those slot machine ticket in, ticket out vouchers. So where do we go to do that? We would go to slot accounting and then attendant pays fills. The main tab that it brings us to is actually the monitor tab for monitoring jackpots and cancel credits. So if your cage cashier is on the workstation that pays those out, they can verify that yes, that slot attendant does have that transaction. They'll have the paperwork, but they can also see it on the monitor tab. From here, they could either click redeem voucher and it would take them to the vouchers tab, or when your hand scanners are configured, they can simply just scan a voucher. And if they're on the monitor tab, it will just take them to the vouchers tab, where then that Tito will show up in the center here. So the Tito that they've just scanned will show up in the center here. You'll see the validation number, you'll see the amount of the Tito, the issue date, and the machine. And you can just go ahead and scan multiple vouchers, and the total amount will increment by the amount of each voucher. So they can just simply look here, check the amount of the 3 vouchers they scanned, and then get that money from their drawer, pay the patron, and then hit the accept button to redeem those vouchers so that those vouchers cannot be cashed again. Now, if the scanner isn't working or an error pops, the first troubleshooting thing I recommend is just hitting the add voucher button. And now this is where they can manually type in a voucher number. So in this case, I have a voucher number for you guys. So I just want to go ahead and type that in for you, just so you can see what it looks like. And so instantly you get the entire 16-digit validation number. You get the amount, you get the issue date, you get where it was issued from. Typically, this is going to be your slot machine, but I issued a purchase voucher out of the cage. And then we see here along the bottom, the total amount, validation number. If a patron was carded into a slot machine, when they actually hit the cash out button, their patron account will be tied to that voucher. You'll get the patron ID and the patron card ID. You'll have your issue expiration date, voucher quantity here. If you wanted to remove that voucher, you could. You would simply highlight it and click the remove button. If you wanted to clear all of the vouchers that you had scanned in, much like when you hit accept, it's going to accept every single voucher here. So if you had 5 or 10 vouchers, they would all be accepted. You would then just simply hit the clear button. It will remove all the vouchers. If a patron says, hey, give me my vouchers back, you can do that by just hitting the clear button instead of hitting remove voucher on every single voucher. So if I hit accept, oh, great, I need an approval to accept a voucher. Yeah, I don't, well, that's disappointing. Okay, let me actually, give me one moment. So we do have approvals, and they are here. That's, hold on. So I can go to human resources. We were talking about roles. Let me go to employees and give myself that role. This is a training instance, so everyone kind of uses it and shares it. So here it said audit, so I can give myself the audit role. And then ideally, I will then be able to process that voucher. So again, I hit redeem voucher here. If I want to manually add, I just simply hit add voucher. You guys will have your scanners set up so they can just simply scan that voucher with their hand scanner. And now you see the voucher has been redeemed. Now what happens, I just want to show you really quickly. If one of your cashiers tries to redeem a voucher that was already redeemed, I want to show you guys the error so you can see what that looks like. And you'll get this system message that pops up, and it'll give you the voucher and the validation number and say it's already been processed. So if you see that message, that means the voucher was already processed at another workstation. And then you can run reports. In this case, you can either hit the report button, or if you don't want to leave the form, because if I hit the report button, it's going to take me to the reports page and I see all the reports I have access to within Slot Accounting. If I hit it again, I can see all the reports in every business area. So I'd be able to see my Cajun Vault and Slot Accounting reports. But if I go back to attendant page bills and I click the double chevron next to reports, now it's going to allow me to run my reports from here without actually leaving the form. So I could look at my voucher history report, or where is it, voucher redemption report, if you wanted to see if that voucher was redeemed or not. If you actually have the voucher, you can then just look at the voucher history report. I'm gonna hit preview, and then this is where you would type in that voucher validation number. It's a 16-digit code. We put that on, and now we see request, acknowledge, process paid, and we can see what device issued it. And then the repository was paid from here. We'll go into the repository column. The device, this is the issuing device. So in this particular case, we also have the audit number and validation number if audit needs it. And we can see the employee that issued it, the employee that redeemed it, gaming day and whatnot. And that's what you do. If you have that voucher validation number, you could use this voucher history report. And then you can say, yeah, it was actually redeemed at this repository at this actual date and time. From a report, if you want to print it out, you could by simply clicking the print button. If you want to actually close, you can hit the close button instead of the X up here. If you want to save it as a PDF, you would hit that PDF icon. If you wanted to export it as a CSV in case you needed to edit any columns or rows, you would click the paper to disk icon, and then you would type in your file name and save it as a CSV so you could open this report in Excel and do any edits and modifications that you needed to do. You need to zoom in, you can use this drop down. Now we're 200%. I'm gonna hit the close button, but that is kind of a handy trick of the trade, if you will, to run a report without leaving the form that you're actually on. The other tab I want to show you in here, also the decline button would literally decline those vouchers that you had and make them not eligible to be redeemed and cashed out. So if you do have access to the decline button, that's what that would do. And it would literally decline every single voucher that you had here in the table. Voucher search, which looks very much like the vouchers tab. This is where you can go to find a voucher in the system, and then if you had access, you could redeem it without having the physical voucher to scan in or that voucher number. What you do is you'd hit the search button. You would then need the asset that the voucher came from. So the slot attendants or slot 4 people might come to you, give you that asset number, 3,000. You'd put in the amount, and then you would put the date that that voucher was issued on. And then when you hit enter, it will show you all the vouchers that were issued from that machine on that day for that exact amount. I can show you what that looks like in the help document. We have this help button in the upper right-hand corner. In every form in Syncros, aside from your custom patron forms, we'll have a corresponding help doc that will take you to a web page and then show you the form that you're on, and then go through what the individual fields mean on that form. On the left-hand side, we have the tabs. So if we wanted to go down to voucher search, that's one of the tabs. We could simply click on voucher search, and it takes us straight down to the voucher search tab within the attendant pays and fills form. So you'll notice they hit the search button. We have the voucher search criteria pop up. They put in the asset number. In our case, since our asset was a repository in Syncros, they have this RD and then this long string of numbers. They put in the $100, and then you see all the vouchers with that exact amount issued on that exact day from that exact device. And it will show the last 4 digits of the voucher validation number for like security reasons, actually. So you can't just go search for vouchers and get the full 16-digit number. And then if there's a patron attached to that voucher when it was printed, you'll be able to see that here at the bottom of the screen. You'll see the patron name, patron ID, expiration, and then all this. And then if you have access to accept, you could accept and pay that voucher. Or depending on your standard operating procedures, you could decline that voucher and then maybe issue a cancel credit if those are your procedures. So these are controlled via FLSs so that you can make it such that certain roles have access to accept or decline. Both of these you can then remove or allow a individual employee to have access to. These are both configurable, the accept and the decline. And that is voucher search, remove vouchers. So if you were going to accept and 2 or 3 vouchers populated, you'd want to remove the vouchers that you did not want to accept. Because if you hit the accept button, it's going to accept all 3. And you're most likely, when you're talking about a single voucher, just want to accept or decline that single voucher. So if there are others with that amount, you're going to want to make sure to remove them and only leave the voucher that you actually wanted to accept or decline to be showing in the table here in the center. Are there any questions on accepting vouchers or declining them, removing them? How the accept, decline, and clear button actually will accept or decline or clear every single voucher you have listed here? Or how voucher search works?
I just have a question about a report. So, is
Sure.
there a report that shows every single voucher that they redeemed with a total? So, when we
So,
physically add them
for,
up, we can match them.
right. So that would be the JPCC buy form, where they can come here and then for that workstation, they can see their vouchers redeemed since the last buy. So I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but
Okay.
we could talk about it now, actually. We could just talk about this now. Why
Okay.
not? So this is in slot accounting, and this is the JPCC buy form. This is like your to balance your drawer for your employees. You'll see all of those Tito tickets will show up here. You'll have a count and you'll have the amount. So they'll have vouchers in their drawer. I assume that's what you're saying, like they have 30 vouchers in their drawer, and then this form only shows that they have 28 that the system actually redeemed. So now you would need to, now you know that there are 2 vouchers that they took in and paid, but they didn't actually redeem in the system. And so this is like the form you would use to then help balance that drawer and to make sure that all the vouchers they have in their drawer were actually redeemed by them at their workstation. And so
Yeah.
all of your paid outs, like I show this to slots because for their slot workstation, it'll show the jackpots paid out, cancel credits paid out, other progressive bonus, super series paid out. You guys won't be using disputes. Your fills paid out will also be here too. So from the chip bank, your chip bank workstation, if you wanted to run the JPCC buy and run that against all the fills you sent to the tables, you'll see that information here also on the JPCC buy form. When you print this form out, when you actually hit the buy button to then perform a buy, and zero the form back out. So what we recommend is at the end of each shift, the cashier will perform a buy and then they'll balance their, well, first they'll look at the count and they'll count their physical Tito tickets and vouchers so that ideally, or like every single time, this matches and it matches with the total on their vouchers. I'm not sure if you actually use like a 10 key to total up the vouchers for the cashier at each shift, but this kind of cuts the balancing time down dramatically because we will tell you literally how many vouchers were actually redeemed since the last buy was performed. So if the number of vouchers matches the physical vouchers in their drawer that they had, then and everything else would match. Basically, I think you would only have vouchers for your cage windows that aren't that are literally just processing vouchers. You would hit buy, and then it would reset for the next cashier at the start of their next shift. So they would be starting over from 0. They would have no vouchers in their drawer, and then they could balance at the end of their shift. Now we do have another form, excuse me, that makes it really easy for your cashiers to determine which voucher they didn't actually redeem and hit the accept on. So from here, if there were a mismatch, if they had 20 physical vouchers and the count only said 18, so you know that they didn't actually redeem 2 of those vouchers in the system, they would go to Synchro Start menu button, Cage and Vault, and then the Scan Vouchers form. This form, you would literally then just use your hand scanner and scan all of your vouchers, and they will show up in here with the voucher number, asset, issue date, amount, and then whether it was redeemed or not. So this form could make that process go so much faster of trying to figure out which voucher or vouchers were not actually redeemed by your Cage cashier. Does that make sense? Is that kind of what you're...
We actually have to have a report that shows everything that we scanned with the total
Right.
to
And it
print
does
it.
when you actually perform the buy, it will do that
Mhm.
as well.
It'll print it and show all of them.
Yeah, it'll print it and then it'll have 2 signature lines on it.
Okay, perfect.
One
That's
for
what I
the
need.
manager, one for the cashier themselves.
Okay,
And
it'll
then,
be for the cashier and audit.
okay, yeah, so one prints and it looks kind of like this, has the summary of all the vouchers and the amount, and then some signature lines. And then a second one prints that shows you the individual transactions on that buy, that will show
Okay.
you each individual voucher and the slot machine it came from
Oh, perfect.
and when it was redeemed.
Okay.
So 2 reports will automatically click. Let me hit the buy button for you and you'll see this. So this will be one report printing the summary. I'm going to cancel it. And then we have the second one, which is the detail report, which will be all the individual vouchers, transactions, and individual amounts.
Perfect. That's what I need.
Okay, awesome. So that is the attendant pays bills form. This is, again, the slot accounting. When I click that Synchro Start menu button, you notice what's highlighted as slot accounting and then JPCC buy. That's the form you're on. This might be one that you would have your Cage cashiers favorite, and they would just simply hit add to favorites. And then that form would be on their favorites so that they would know to go to it. So there's no confusion. Maybe like favorites probably will help employees out in the first few days, but after a few days of repeatedly doing the same things over and over, people get pretty fast with navigating through the system. And then if you needed to reprint that report, you can. You can go to reports and it would be in slot accounting. And we have them here, the JPCC buy summary report and detail report. But the summary that you get with the signatures on it only happens when you do that buy. But you can reprint a detail report if you wanted to, once you got that buy summary. And then you could make them sign that in case the printer wasn't set up or the printer didn't work. You could reprint the detail report and then maybe make the cashier sign that in case of emergencies if the regular summary report did not print for you. So just so you know, in order to run a report, let me show you how you run them from the reports page, if you will. I always like to hit preview and then run. You will have to put in that buy number. Any field with an asterisk and the parameters that pop up are required. So you'll get the buy number. How do you get the buy number? You would go to JPCC buy summary, run that. We'll just say for the gaming date between, if you wanted it for a single day, you would put in that day twice. Let me see if we can do that. Let me show you that. Let's see what we have. You can even filter it by window if you wanted. Page 02. Then you hit the process reports button, the big process reports button at the bottom, and we have the buy and then we have the buy number. So this is a case where you would want to zoom in, and I need to count the zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 7, 5. This was a huge buy that I did yesterday for the slots class. So if you went and then ran that detail report again, just in case, you put in 1, you put in your 6 zeros, 575. You hit OK, you'd hit process reports. And now we have, these were all the individual jackpots. There's a dispute process, but these would be your Tito tickets. It'd tell you the username. And this is all from that particular cage window 02. And this is what your detail report will look like. If you ever have questions about reports, because you're going to have lots of reports, maybe in Synchros they're named a little bit differently than they're named in the previous system that you worked in before. We also have the help column here on the far right-hand side. So we went preview, run, and then parameters. We did our parameters. We hit process reports to run that report. You can run multiple reports at the same time if you wanted to. If you wanted to run 2 or 3 different reports, you could just preview, run, preview, run, preview, run, and then you'd hit process reports. Now, if you wanted a detailed synopsis of a report, hey, what was the JPCC by summary report? You just simply need to click on the little question mark in our blue box here. And that takes us to another web document, web page that has the list of all of our reports. In this particular case, it's in slot accounting. And it even has, so we have our synopsis of what that report has in it and the data that it pulls for you. And then we have these blue hyperlinked samples. So if we wanted a sample, we could just simply click on that sample, the underlined sample, and it's going to bring us up a sample with sample data, obviously, sample data. So you can see the columns and rows and what's going to be in that report and if that report is going to be useful for you guys. The search button, this is another way you can go to either find a report or form in Synchros. If we type in ATT pay, it's going to show the reports. We have the attendant pays sequence report. This is where you can see all of your jackpots, cancel credits, things like that. Or if you scroll down, now we have all our forms. And this is one way. Notice these are all in blue with underlines. That means they're hyperlinked as well. So if I click on the attendant pays fills form under the forms, it takes me to the attendant pays fills form. If I would have clicked on attendant pays sequence report under reports, reports show up first. If you just want forms to show up, you can click on the forms radio button. If you just want reports, you can click on reports. It's going to run that attendant pays sequence report for us. Again, if we want to run it, this between is hard-coded, so we put our dates we want to run that report for. If we wanted to run it for a single day, we would just put that date in both boxes. So we'd put July 1st in both boxes, and it would just run that report for July 1st. It's processing. Now we would see all of our cancel credits, jackpots, and whatnot from the attendant pay sequence report. The next thing that I wanted to jump into would be transferring funds and funds transfer, transferring funds from your main bank to your Cage windows. In Synchros, you do that through Cage and Vault. So you would click the SynchroStar menu button, Cage and Vault. You would go down to funds transfer. That's the name of the form. Here on this form, you could have this hard-coded. It defaults to your repository. We have our transfer type of funds, sending repository. So we're sending from Cage 02. We're going to send back to main bank. These options that are available in the dropdown and the denoms that are available are all configurable, and they will be set up for you by your Konami implementation specialist or tech lead, as we like to call them. So in this case, if we wanted to send $1,000 in $100 bills, we have our table down here. It has the currency. We have denoms, 100. We would go into the amount column and type in that amount. Then we want to be sure to hit tab or enter to save that entry. in that field, I hit 500, I could either tab and then it takes me down to the next row or hit enter. And now we just simply hit issue request. It's going to print that slip for that funds transfer, that receipt, whomever needs to sign. Now there is one more step. We issued it, but now we need to send it. So from here, we have our pending transfers field. We just select the transfer. There should probably only be one. And now we can either reprint the paperwork, we can void it, or we can go ahead and then just send it over to main bank. And that's kind of the ease of use from sending cash transfers in the system between repositories. So you just simply go to Cage and Vault, Funds Transfer. Your repository should be defaulted, and then you will just select your receiving repository. If you were sending cash and you wanted cash back, maybe you're sending $100 bills and you need 20s for your drawer. If you guys have the second transfer enabled, you can then say funds coming from main bank back to us, and then you would put in what you're sending them. Maybe you're sending them $500 in $100 bills. The second transfer, we have second amount, we have, if there's a variance, you will want these to balance. So we say 500 and 20s coming back. We can now issue that request. We get the receipts again. And again, we have to go to our pending transfers. It's now the one on the bottom, and we'll want to make sure to send that transfer over. So that is sending transfers between repositories, sending fund transfers between repositories that I believe you guys will be doing. Now, how do you receive those funds? From here, you go to the SynchroStart menu button. The same way you receive funds is the same form you use to receive table games, fills, and credit requests. And that's going to be in Cage and Vault, and it's going to be Chip Bank FC. So we go to our Chip Bank fill and credit form. It will give you that audio alert as fills and credits populate the form. So on here, what do we have? We have all the different type of transactions that can show up on this form. These are table games, fills, and credits, turn-in transfers. You're going to actually turn in transactions and roll them up from your Cage window to your main bank. We have chip transfers, market transfers. So pit markers will show up in here as they transfer them to the Cage at the end of the gaming day. Front money transfers, again from the pit. We have table game jackpots. Then here are fund transfers. That's coming from main bank to the actual individual Cage windows and vice versa. And then hard count, soft count transfers, probably won't be using that. But if you didn't want to see your fund transfers for whatever reason, and you just want to see table games and fills, you can just uncheck the box. And now those do not show up on the form for you. When I check the box, it shows back up. So here was our fund transfer. I sent one from the main bank. Our repository is Cage02. So I sent one from the main bank just to show you what that process looks like when you want to receive that transfer. We saw how to send it. Now how you receive it is you find that line item here on your Chip Bank FC form, which stands for Chip Bank Fills and Credits. And you have to actually click into the status field in the status column. You see, did everybody see that message pop up? It said press to change status. So I literally just click on that sent, and we get the pop-up that says, has the fund transfer been received? You'll notice at the bottom we have details for the fund transfer. On the top, we did have transaction type, date and time, where it came, who requested or where it came from, the Synchros transaction number, and then the total amount. And then we have a priority column. So for table games, fills, and credits and transfers and things of that nature, you can have high priority, and then it shows up at the top. Just because something is high priority doesn't mean you have to actually process that transaction first, though. So here we have our funds transfer has been received prompt. At the bottom, we have the details and we see that we have $100 bills and we have $100 bills totaling $10,000 coming. So your people would count the money, whatnot, make sure it's all there, and then accept that transfer. That you simply click yes, and that transfer drops off your Chip Bank FC form. And that is how you send and receive transfers between workstations. The sending workstation simply goes to Cajun Vault Funds Transfer, and the receiving workstation needs to go to Cajun Vault Chip Bank FC. And this is also the form that we're going to be using to process table games, fills, and credits, and potentially table jackpots if you guys are going to be issuing those in Synchros. So what do? If we want to see the details, this is a really nice feature. So we click on the fill line. Again, we have our details. This will literally tell you how the count of each denomination in that fill. So we want 40 $500 chips. We want 120 $100 chips. We want 140 $25 chips. So these will be 2 stacks of purple, 6 stacks of black, 7 stacks of green. Jesus. 12 stacks of red, and then 10 stacks here of the dollar denoms. So now in this case, you can set up Synchro to auto print that paperwork for you and to auto acknowledge. If you do not want to do that, you would just go ahead, and same with funds transfer, you just have to click on the current status in the status field. This says it's in the request phase. So in Synchros with jackpots and with, you saw it on vouchers and with these fills and credits, we have a 4-step process where we go, where the process is request, which is the initial transfer has been requested, or the fill. So we request it, then we acknowledge it, we print out the paperwork, sign it, and then we send it or process it. So we click request, we get the acknowledge prompt pop up. Would you like to acknowledge the fill transfer request? Yes. We get a chirp. It's now printing out the paperwork that your chip bank cashier is then going to sign, and then they will get the chips ready, put them in the cage, or in the bird cage, I'm sorry, have security come, however you coordinate that, so that your cage person signs, security usually signs. You will then hit the print button to say that, yes, it has been printed. Now, did we send it to the table? Has the fill been sent? So this is what they would click after they've signed everything, gotten the chips, and handed it off to security, so security can walk that fill to the table. So you say yes, and now you'll notice the status is grayed out, and we're in the processed phase as it's been processed. So for your fills, those transactions terminate and fall off of your Chip Bank FC form when the table accepts the fill. So this was BJ01, so me being a system admin, I can go to the table and accept the fill as if I am a table game supervisor. So I go to BJ01. This is what they see and do. They would go to table fill. They would say that they've received that fill. We see all the denoms in here. And now when we go back to Cajun Vault, Chip Bank FC, that fill is no longer there. How do you process credits? You will occasionally get credit requests from the table. That's when they send chips that they have an overflow of or too many of back to the cage for storage. You then need to send them the paperwork, so you still have to acknowledge the request. You print the paperwork out. In this case, you just send them empty racks so that they can put the chips that they're crediting off. In this case, it's 1,000. It's a single $1,000 chip. Maybe a patron came from High Limit over to the regular pit area, that does not have $1,000 chip on the game, but they wanted to buy in with that $1,000 chip they brought over from High Limit. So the table accepts the chip and then they just credit it off and send it back to the cage. So then it can go back to High Limit from there. So you'll notice this is a cyan color. And when we highlight it over, it says waiting for action from the table. So now again, the table, patron tracking, table rating. Blackjack 01, they go to table credit and they acknowledge that the security came over with the empty bird cage. They put the single $1,000 chip into that empty tray or rack, if you will. They hit the send button. Now it's off of their table. We go back to Cage and Vault Chip Bank FC. And we see that now the status has changed from that cyan colored print to send. And then we simply click on it and we acknowledge that the credit transfer has been received, that security came over to us with the $1,000 chip. We received it, we put it away, stored it, and then we complete the transaction and have it drop off of our Chip Bank FC form. Are there any questions on this, on how to send transfers, how to receive them, how to process table games fills and credits?
Nope. I will have it
Okay.
automated so that it prints automatically though.
Okay, yeah, and then Terrence will set that up for you. And so the printer will just go and then they can, sign and whatnot, and then get the chips ready to be sent to the tables. The next one we're going to talk about, or what are you guys going to be using for your like miscellaneous payouts of the cage, or
We won't use that.
you won't be using synchros?
No. We have a
Oh.
paid out form that we have to use, and then we won't be using like transfer funds in here either.
Okay. Well, there's a payout issue form and we have a receipt form, but you're going to be using that outside of synchros. Do you want to see?
You could show it to me. I mean, we may move to it at some point, but I know in the
Okay.
beginning.
So this one is our kind of older version of the form. Let me show you this one and the newer version, actually. So this one, you would say paid out type. It does require a patron. This is just for payouts. So I'm going to use Tony Stark. And if you decide to go, and so then you could put, if you had your own separate receipt number, you could write that in here. Otherwise, Synchros is going to generate its own transaction number for this particular transaction. You would say, if Tony went off property and you wanted to then reimburse him for going to a restaurant off property, you can do so. Went to, I don't know, steakhouse. And then you would put in the dollar amount here, and then you would hit process. And that's how you could record. You get your receipt to print out. You can customize what the receipt looks like and whatnot. But that's how you would report or record if you actually had money leaving that drawer, and then have a corresponding transaction in Synchros for that. If you wanted to then void a particular payout, you could. Again, these do require a patron. So if we wanted to void this one or void this $10 one, we could either A, reprint the receipt or void from here. We have the different payout types. And those are all customizable. So now we've voided that $10 one, but all the fields in this dropdown are completely customizable through payout type setup. Our one hesitation is we don't really have great reporting for this. You would have to go through and use our business analytics or Oracle Analytics. We do have a separate type of payout issue form, a brand new type with our latest version here, 4.0, and that is actually called receipt issue. And now the difference between receipt issue is we have amazing reporting for it built in. So when I hit this arrow here, we can just go down to receipt transaction report, run that, calendar date. We don't really print a lot of receipts in our test instance, so let me just go from January 1st to today. And I hit OK. And this will tell you every transaction, gives you the quantity and denom for that particular transaction, airfare, if there was a custom field attached. That all shows up here, the repository that issued it, the receive amount. And so that's kind of our receipt issue form. This is our more recent, more up-to-date form for actually doing paid outs or paid ins. And the other thing is on our payout issue, you have to have a patron assigned. You can configure this form so that you have no patron assigned. So if you're taking in blackjack tournament entry fees and you don't require patron information, or you don't want that patron record, you just want to keep track of that money coming in, you can do so. We can say tournament receipt. You can select the direction. Is it money coming in, or is it also money leaving the cage? So you can say that, okay, I like to put it in 1 cent denoms, just so you can type in any value. But if you were doing $20 that you're receiving for this particular tournament, and then you can type in, Friday slot tournament. We'll just say tourney, and then maybe it's 7/21/2023. If you wanted to, you could do something like that, and then, oh, this one requires a patron. My bad. But you can configure them to not require a patron if you desired. Then you hit process. We have a receipt print, and now this will show up in the cool receipt reporting. So if you did want to use Synchros to keep track of your paid ins and paid outs, I highly recommend you do it through receipt issue versus through payout issue that you currently have access to. So this might be something to note, or refer back to this training if in the future you do decide. With this form, everything is customizable. The individual receipt is customizable. If you had an ATM short pay or something along those lines, you can then create that receipt type, and that might only be an issue, $5 pull tab. This one did not have a denomination or currency assigned to it, so whoever set this up did an incomplete job. Hopefully that wasn't me, but again, and then you can have custom field types for custom notes attached to that receipt if you wanted to. If you had a ticket for the comedy club and they came and paid you, you could have a receipt for that. And then you then distributed some merchandise because they bought that ticket to the comedy club, you can assign the particular piece of merchandise by using the actual custom field type. So we have the payout issue and then the receipt issue. And we even have employee receipt issue, which looks pretty much the same as our receipt issue. And all the employee receipts also show up on that fantastic receipt transaction report. Now, employee receipt issue does force an employee. There is no way to issue an employee receipt without an employee attached to it. We can go to that void tab and we can see all the receipts issued to that particular employee in the last 180 days, I believe. This did work before. Maybe it's been over 6 months since I used this. Yes, so I did 365 days. You could see the receipts that I issued to myself during testing in November, in December, in January. If you need a void, you can. And there are micro reports, so you can see lifetime history receipt for a particular employee. So this is just much better tracking for your receipts within Synchros. This is if you're deciding to use Synchros. So I would highly recommend you would go with the receipt issue form and employee receipt issue if you wanted to do so, if you have that need. Now, you guys will be issuing pouches or impresses to your employees from the cage?
We will, but it will
Through-
be not through Synchros. It's a 2-part form we have to use.
Okay, well, Synchros has a form for that. It would be in revenue centers. Let me just show you this really, in case you did ever go to Synchros.
Okay.
You would go to revenue centers. For each individual pouch, you would need to create a specific repository for it because you can only have one pouch per repository. I know this shows 4, but you can only have one checked out per repository at a time. So typically we would say the naming convention you'd want to use would be maybe slot attendant, wallet, something of that nature. And then you would have to actually put in the receivers, like who can actually receive that pouch, maybe Nicolas Cage. You then click on that, and now it assigns that particular pouch to that particular employee. There is some setup required, and then you can actually do transfers and whatnot if you need to fill that pouch or you want to check that pouch back in. You would come in here, you'd select that pouch. There'd only be one selectable for that particular repository. If you wanted to add money, you could. We would need to add $100 in ones, we would do that. And then we would hit the fill button and that would add as well as printing a receipt. And we can see the fills and credits. When we want to check that repository back in, we hit the check-in button. And this will show, we would also want to fill out how much money is currently in that Impress. This has all of our currencies here associated with it. Again, I'm sorry, it's our Konami Zone test environment, so we have a lot of superfluous rows and fields that we end up performing or adding while we're testing. So I hit the check-in, and now 2,300, that was our current amount. And now it'll check back in without a variance, but you would just simply put in whatever was actually in the pouch into the values of your fields here to record that so you have reporting for your pouches. And so that's how Synchros uses pouches. Next, we want to talk about safekeeping. This is a form that you could use. You would need to have a patron assigned, and obviously in order to make a safekeeping deposit, but this form works much like a safety deposit box in a bank, where if in this case we have Tony Stark, he's kind of like my favorite patron to use. So you'll have your currency types available. In your case, it will most likely just be US dollars. Where did my US dollars go? Here they are. And now you'll have the table here, and you have to literally put in the exact denominations and values into here, and only those exact denominations and values can be withdrawn or redeemed via the redemption tab. So we first found our patron. Let me show you that again, because you might not have seen how that works, but when you first bring up the form, if you have a patron, they'll be here. You'll see their photos, you'll see their signature. If you don't, you have to find a patron. You do that by either hitting Control F or clicking on the Find button on your Forms toolbar, which is the toolbar below the global toolbar. So we hit Find. You can type in your patron name. If you don't know the patron name, or you can swipe their patron card. Ideally, they have a player's card. You can swipe through your card reader, and then it'll bring the patron up instantly on whatever form you're on. In this case, if you happen to know their name, you could type in Tony Stark. It will find that patron. Now, if you don't know the patron's exact name, if you don't spell their name exactly correctly, and that spelling that you put in there is not in Synchros, you will get this error here, not really an error, but it'll say your search returned no data. So you want to be wary of that and make sure you actually have the right patron, which is nice. Or the nice thing about the safekeeping form is not only do we have our patron name in the upper left-hand corner, we also have a picture and their signature that we'll get from their driver's license that we can match against. So from here, if we didn't know exactly how to spell his name, and we know it was Tony, so it starts with a T and then Stark. So it the last name starts with an ST. I can use the percent sign as a wild card. So it's going to fill in any result and return any result of a person in our database with a first name that starts with a T and a last name that starts with ST by using the percent sign. I click OK, and now we see we have Tony Starr, Tony Stark, Tony Stomper, and Tammy Storm. We want our Tony Stark, so we can either double click on the one we want, or we can just highlight it and click the OK button. Tony's here. We have his safekeeping account details. So he has $1,710 on deposit, and he gave us a check for $150. I don't know how much of the safekeeping form you'll be using, but this is something that you may use for an unclaimed jackpot for a patron. If they have an account, you just process the jackpot and then put the funds in here. You may want to store it as a check. If you did, you would hit detail. And that check number you'd want to give most likely is that jackpot number, or maybe the last 6 digits of that jackpot transaction number, like 00175, because you want these check numbers to be unique on that particular patron account. So if you have a dummy account and you assign the same check number to several different transactions, it will cause some problems in our system. So we have the $1,250 for the amount. We hit the add button. It's up here. Now on for deposit, we see our already deposited checks. We can hit close. Now we have the $1,250 in here, the amount in words. If we hit the accept button here in the lower left-hand corner to complete that deposit and record that deposit, then this $1,250 will go to here, and the new closing balance will be $3,110. If Tony also had some US dollars he wanted to deposit with us, let's say he had $90 in ones, for whatever reason, we could add that. And now the new closing balance would be $1,320. It'll add the $90 plus the $1,250. We simply hit the accept button. It's going to print out our receipt for us. I just cancel these receipts, and now the balance available has been updated. If we needed to void a transaction, we can hit the void, and then it will show us our most recent deposits from the last time he had done a redemption. So if he did 5 deposits before doing a redemption, it'll show us all 5 of those, and then we can choose which one we wanted to void. If we accidentally voided the wrong transaction, that's what the revert button is for. The revert button is just to revert a void. I can show you. We can void this, receipt prints, and now oh no, that was a mistake. We can revert that last void. I'm kind of going into super details here, but now we're back to that 3,200. The manual, again, this is if you had your own separate pre-printed receipts or book with receipt numbers in it that you were recording those. You could then put in your own receipt based on your pre-printed receipts or your separate log that you keep. The redemption tab, this is where you would go to actually withdraw money for Tony. If Tony comes to you and says, I would like to withdraw some of my front keeping money, you could come here. We see that it's only US dollars that he has on deposit, so we select US dollars from the dropdown. If we want to withdraw that check, we would hit the detail button again, which is right next to checks. We could then select that check. Looks like Tony has furnished his ID, so we can go ahead and process that jackpot for him. So let's hit the add button. Then we hit close to close the little window. In this case, instead of it saying accept, it's actually now print slip that will then process that transaction. If he also wants his $100 in 20s, we can withdraw those. You can do partial withdrawals. If he also then wants just 500 of the $1,600 in $100 bills, you can do that as well. but you can only withdraw from the fields that have deposited in, and then you have to give him that currency, that denomination. So literally you need to give him 5 $20 bills and 5 $100 bills along with his check back. In order to do that, you would hit print slip. It's going to ask you if you want to accept this redemption. You simply select OK. Your receipt prints again. And now we have the new updated balance. We have our 2 checks. We have $1,200. If you want to see a history of Tony's transactions, you can just select the history tab here. Now it's blank, so you can either click, I just typically click show all. Tony is one of our favorite patrons. So you see this long history of safekeeping deposits, withdrawals. We have our voids. We have our reverts here of those voids. Then we have the withdrawal. If you'll notice in the transaction details, it will tell you the denom and the amounts and the count for the actual paper currency or soft currency. And then you can see the check and the check numbers. And then you have the date and time that these transactions actually took place at. In this case, there was a check for $1,050 with this check number 6734. And then we have $50 bills. 10 of them were withdrawn during this safekeeping withdrawal transaction. Are there any questions on safekeeping?
No.
Okay, let's see. I want to go over now rolling the shift and repository status before we jump into credit. And then after we do the rolling shift, we may take a little break, if that's okay with everyone, a 10-minute break after we go over the next part of rolling the shift. So number 10 on our agenda, you have rolling the shift. I did skip foreign exchange because I don't believe you'll be utilizing that at all.
No, we won't.
Yeah, okay. So if you did want or were curious about that, we could always go over that during our regular training as well. If next month you decide, hey, maybe I want to look at that form. But this it's primarily for cruise ships because they have passengers. We have several cruise lines in Europe that have Synchros on them, and they have passengers from various different countries in Europe. So they're exchanging euros, they're exchanging like Deutschmarks and British pounds and all of those currencies. But anywho, let's go to repository status. The nice thing about Synchros in this version is you won't have to open and close repositories. Once your repositories are open, they can remain open and the gaming day will be able to roll without you having to close them. So this is kind of like, this form is somewhat a relic of prior versions, but I just want to show it to you anyways. So if we wanted to close Cage Windows 02 and there were no outstanding transactions on it, we would simply hit the close button, but there are some pending transfers. And then one option, let's go to a different window. And so we have case 01. I closed it. If we wanted to open on next shift and we were rolling the gaming day, this would then auto open that repository for us. But you guys no longer have to do that. This is just if you have one-off repositories. I don't know if you have a blackjack tournament or something, and then you open maybe a mobile repository, but you might just be using your impresses for that you record elsewhere. But you could do that, open, close. This is the form you would use to open and close individual repositories, but how Synchros is going to be set up for you, you won't have to touch this form. Everything will auto open and close for you. So one thing I need to do really quickly is clear out those transactions. So when we go to system admin and we go to shift change, this is the form we're going to use to open and close our tables. So we see main bank, it says there's a funds transfer that we need to process, and then we have blackjack open. So we need to go, in order to roll the gaming day, we would have to have all those tables be closed and either set to open on the next shift or just closed period. So we do have BJ01 open, so I'm going to go in here and close this game. So this is something that your pit does. They would then close table. Sure, they have the option to open on next shift, which is kind of nice. He's gonna walk with 2 purple. This table's now closed. Or it will allow us to roll the shift. One thing I need to do is change my repository. I have to do that in ILP setup. So bear with me 1 second here. Save. Now that funds transfer we sent from page 02 back to main bank shows up here. We'll receive it. We'll receive the second one that we sent. Okay, now we have to go, oh my goodness, because I issued it as a second transfer. I got to go back and then change to page 02 to then receive it. This is much easier when you just have the multiple workstations. So now again, since that transfer had a second, let's see if we're good to go. So now you see the change shift button is available to be pressed. When you press this, this will roll the shift for you from one gaming day to the next. So whoever's on graveyard, I believe, does your gaming day go to 4 a.m.? Whomever your graveyard supervisor would be would then roll that gaming day for you guys. You just simply hit change shift. An error occurred. Oh, pending transfer. Anywho, the shift should change roll for you so long as there are no pending transfers on these repositories. And that's how you roll a shift. And it will not allow you to roll the shift twice. You would literally have to leave the form and then come back to the form in order to roll that shift again. So once the shift is rolled, you will see it update down here in the lower right-hand corner where we show the gaming day. You guys, I believe, only have one shift, so it'll go from 7:20 to 7:21. And that is how that works. I wonder why that transaction got lost. Anywho, let me go back and check this one really quickly. Okay, well, let's just, that's great. Okay, so that covers the majority of the cage part. The next part we're going to go through is the actual credit and issuing markers and front money transactions and then patron credit accounts. So let's take a 12-minute break and then come back and pick up with credit. So at 10:30, guys, we will pick back up at 10:30. So we're going to take a 12-minute break. Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. We are back. We are on, if everyone's back here with me, we are on number 11 on the agenda, the patron credit portion. We're going to go over establishing patron credit lines, how you would do that in Synchros, and then talk about this trip only, and then go into markers and front money. Probably just briefly gloss over checks, as it's very similar to markers, and you'll be using a separate system for processing your personal checks, if I'm not mistaken. So patron credit, if you want to give a patron a credit account or add a credit status, if you will, you go to the patron credit form. So it's currently blank. I can bring up our friend Tony. One other thing I want to show you when you are bringing up patrons or finding patrons, much like how you can favorite forms by using the star up here, you can also favorite patrons and see your recent patrons that you searched for by using the star here on the searchable items menu. We have our favorited patrons. We got Peter Parker, Clark Kent, Tony Stark, and then you would even have your recent patrons that you brought up. So let's bring up Tony. Now, what you will see on the patron credit form, the patron tab, you'll see the company name if you have that associated with the patron, patron first, last name, AKA names. This is more common when you have guests from Asia. They may have their kind of like American name, if you will, as their AKA names, and they have their perhaps formal name, first and last name here. We have their credit status. So on an account without credit status, it'll just be inactive or none. But your patron, you will have to change their status to active is the first thing you will need to do. Here, if they already have patron credit established, you can see their permanent credit line. You can see TTO currently approved. You can see the amount of markers they have used towards their credit line, and then you can see their available credit. You would also see their checks, but you guys won't be processing checks, so ideally this is always going to be at 0. You would also see their social security number as well here, or their EIN. So this is what you see on the patron tab of the patron credit form. So when you are activating a patron credit account, you will have to make sure that their credit status is set to active. The next thing you'll have to make sure in contacts, they either need a preferred address or an exclude from mailings address in the system. You will have all this when you sign up your patrons through our Patron One Touch form and you scan their driver's license. It'll automatically associate that address on their driver's license, their preferred address. But you will want to make sure that you actually have a preferred address or exclude from mailing address in the system, or you will not be able to activate that patron credit account. The physical tab, this just has physical characteristics of the patron. You don't need to do anything here on this tab. The dates tab, you will have to have a valid date of birth here. So this also automatically imports when you sign up that patron through our Patron One Touch form and you scan in their driver's license, that date of birth will automatically be imported. So you will have that, and you will need that in order to activate a patron account and give them credit. Next, you'll also need a valid driver's license or ID. So when you scan in that driver's license, again, it satisfies a lot of things. It'll give you their address, it'll give you that valid ID that's not expired, and then it'll give you the actual birth date. So most of that gets taken care of by enrolling your patron through our Patron One Touch form. Credit images, this is where you could go if you wanted to store a credit image. If you guys were taking checks, this is where you could go to save a picture of their personal check so you would know what one of their personal checks looks like. patron images. This is where you could go to see their picture. When you scan in a driver's license and enroll them into your database through our Patron One Touch form, it's going to have their picture like this. Their photograph is going to have a picture of their entire driver's license, and then it's going to have a picture of their signature on the driver's license. So if you wanted to see their signature, you could come to the patron images and you will see a photo of the signature on their driver's license. Credit card, if you wanted to store patron credit card information, you could do so. Credit limit, this is where you would go to actually set that credit limit. So, or adjust. If 777,000 was a little too much for Tony, even though he's a billionaire, maybe we wanted to knock it down to just 50,000. We could do so here by making the change to the permanent credit limit. You can also see the TTO, which is this trip only approved, which would be a potential temporary increase or decrease to the credit line that you can do through our TTO form. I will show you that in a minute. So we have a credit limit, and then we have who it was authorized by. In this case, we say Terrence Chapman, who is your illustrious tech lead, or it could be Angelo Greco, who is the training lead for this project. And then we would click allow checks and allow markers. These check boxes need to be filled in. If you are accepting checks to pay off a marker and you want to process that check through Syncros, you would want to make sure this is also checked. But if you guys are not, then you would want to make sure that is unchecked. And then you will not be allowed to deposit or cash a check for a patron. You may be using that third-party Every system to then cash a personal check and then use that cash to pay off your marker. I'm just not sure what your procedure is for that. But if you did want to accept checks in Syncros, you would have to have allow checks selected here as well. And then that would allow you to accept a check to pay off a marker if you want to go that route. But if you're having a third party and that instantly can tell you if those funds are available in a bank and instantly takes those funds from that bank for that check, you may just want to use that system. The financial institution. So you need a bank account and a bank attached to the patron credit record in order to then issue credit markers to that patron. Because what's going to happen is when you issue that marker, it's pretty much like a check, right? So it's going to print out a check, if you will, with that bank account information, the bank name, bank account number, and the amount of the marker, so that you can go and then deposit that marker should you need to, if the patron is unable to pay off the marker before the marker hold period has expired. In this case, you can attach multiple bank accounts to an individual patron's account. If you wanted to add one, you could simply hit add. If you wanted to remove, we want to remove this Bank of America one, we would simply hit the remove button. Now we just have our Wells Fargo. We wanted to add, I could click add. You would have to hit the find button to find the financial institution. We could then select that Bank of America again. We would put in an account number. Oopsies. And then we would put in the default check hold days, default marker hold days. This you would set up when you set up the financial institution itself. And then you have the options to set this as the default account that will show up when you go to issue that marker to Tony. And you would want to make sure it's active so that there is that drop down and it's an account available. So if Tony were to say, hey, assign this one to this other bank account, you could do that. You have that option. We have the call before deposit. That would allow you to run the call before deposit report. And then it should show up where that, okay, we want to deposit this marker. Be sure to call Tony. Custom fields. These are pre-configured notes, if you will, that you can assign to a patron account. In this case, we have allergies, and one of the allergies is shellfish or seafood. It's just a neat way to assign a pre-configured note to a patron account. so that you can, when you search for these things using your business analytics tools, you have the exact field name spelling that you're looking for when you're going searching your patron database. Notes, this is where you can put your free form notes. You do have auto-generated notes. We see this finance note, patron credit suspended by system due to a return write-off marker. So in our system, whenever you set the marker status to returned, it is going to automatically suspend that patron credit status. So the only way then to change that patron credit status from suspended back to active would be to come to the patron credit form, go to credit status, which is on the patron tab, and then change it to active and then save it here. Credit notes. I was just testing the follow-up feature on this particular note. You could set a follow-up date. And now when you run the follow-up credit note report, it will show this particular note for you. This is more for whoever's handling markers and collecting on markers. It might be something they could use just to keep organized. And then we have our patron micro reports, and these are all the same micro reports that you get on the patron tabs. You can see their advanced incentive, comp detail, incentive, point history, wager history. If you wanted to look at their wager history before deciding the amount of credit you wanted to extend to them, you could do so by running that micro report, at least see their wager history. And then with financial institution, you may, I guess your procedure is you may end up calling the patron's bank first and verifying that they have available funds in their account and seeing their average balance for the last 6 months or whatever particulars you run. So this is how you would go about adding a patron credit line, adding a credit line to a patron account and activating that patron credit status so that, I gotta go over, so that that patron can be issued markers from Syncros. So we have active patron credit status. We have a good address, either preferred or exclude from mailings. We have their birthday. We have an ID, valid ID saved. And then we have a credit limit and a credit authorizer and a bank account attached to the patron credit, attached to the patron account. We hit the save button. Consolidated W2G is out of date. Okay. All right. Okay, that is how you go about activating the credit status on a patron account. It did not update. There was an error. I had to investigate that. Now that we have their patron credit account activated, if let's say Tony then went and used all of his credit, we could go to the TTO credit form. And this would allow us, Tony has followed us, so whatever patron you're working on will follow you from form to form. Tony has followed us. We see that his TTO proved to 0. We see his permanent credit line of $777,000. We see his used marker. He still has $768,000 available, but if you did want to extend that credit line, typically this will be somewhere near 0, and your policy were to extend the credit line by, let's say, 10%. You could then set how long that credit extension is going to last for. So if you just wanted to give it to Tony through Monday, you would then click on, we have July 24th, July 24th, 2023. When I click the 24, that's going to finalize that selection. And now we see the date and then the increase amount. We can do $77,000, that's 10%. And then we want to put in an authorizer. We can go with Angelo again, and we simply hit the save button. And now it has increased the limit. And you'll notice that Tony has been removed from the form. The form has been entirely cleared out. That is another way you know that you actually increased a patron's this trip only credit. In the history, we can see that status message as you might wonder what happened, and we'll see that the limit was in fact increased. If you make an error, let's bring Tony back. I'm going to go to the favorites, click on him. And we didn't want to increase it by 77,000. We only wanted to increase it by 7,000. We can go back in again, and this time we can just do a negative adjustment. Authorize it, so that's going to bring that TTO down $70,000. And now Tony will only have a $7,000 increase. So in case you ever make an error on this form, you can always do a negative adjustment. Or if you literally just wanted to do a negative adjustment and you didn't feel comfortable with a person having that $50,000 or $770,000 credit line, you could do a negative adjustment for a shorter period of time if you wanted to. That is the TTO this trip only form. The next form I want to show you is the financial institution form. So we go into finance financial institution. This is where we can go to add an individual bank for a patron. So if a bank currently is not in our system, we can add that bank here. We would type in that bank name. I guess we can do JP Morgan Chase. I'll use my initials, so this isn't in the system. You can then put in a branch name. You'd want to put in a routing number, that 9-digit number. You want to put that routing number as the main office routing number. This is all primarily for your reporting purposes. This is where you can put the default check and marker hold days, and then the default days it takes to clear after you have deposited those markers or checks. Put 30 checks, we typically leave at 1 account. This would be if you're actually paying out to this bank account. We are not, so we can leave this blank. Your address, you can put the address, telephone number, email for that bank, and a note. Maybe, ask to speak to Alex Neto. He's the bank manager. So now you would know who to call, who your contact is at that bank. And then all you need to do is just go ahead and save that record. Excuse me. And you'll know the record is saved because now you have a unique financial institution ID. So we have 42 bank records saved in the system currently. The first thing you would do, though, before just adding a bank willy-nilly, would probably be to hit the find button, and then this will list for you all of the banks you currently have. So your life may be much easier if the bank is already saved in the system. You can then just click on it and bring that up and double check that the routing number and main office number are the same, so that when you go to deposit your marker check, that it hits the right bank and you have the right banking information. So those are your financial institutions. Any questions, guys, on creating or updating patron credit status? Again, typically what's going to happen, you're going to pull up a patron. Let me see the G's. And that patron will have none as their credit status, so you'll have to go to active. You'll have to make sure they have a good address. You have to make sure birthday, they have an ID, so you would have to enter in that information. And then you would go to credit limit. You would set that limit, 50,000. If that were your limit, the authorizer, allow checks and markers. Attach financial institution. How do you do that? If you guys don't remember, you hit the find button. I can hit OK from here because there are less than 500 records. We can use our JP Morgan. It puts in our hold days that we had set to default. We'd want to make it active and set it as our default account. And then we simply hit the save button and that will update. Let's go non-commercial. United States, date, NV, expiration date. Sure. And you're going to want to make sure to put in their actual account number. The nice thing about Syncros, if you do make an error, it will go to the tab and highlight the error field or put a red box around where your mistake is so you can go to easily correct it. I totally did that on purpose, guys. And now we see record updated. And so now our patron, Nicholas Gaylor, has a $50,000 credit limit. So that is our credit account, our patron credit form. That's where you go to update it. We have our this trip only form. Now, where do you go to actually issue a marker? You would go to Cage and Vault and Markers. So if a patron comes to the cage and your patron will follow you, the note that keeps popping up is a mandatory read note. Those are very nice where if you have important information that you want all of your employees to see about a particular patron, you would save that note as a mandatory read. And now anytime you bring up that patron's account, that patron will have that mandatory read, and you literally cannot do anything in Syncros until you hit OK and acknowledge that mandatory read note. So here was our patron that we had just updated their credit account status for. They have their permanent credit limit. We can see their use markers, use checks, total credit, total available credit, any front money. We'll go into front money after this, and then any TTO approval, any checks or markers and write-off, any used front money. The first tab we're on, or if we take it from the top, much like with our safekeeping form, the patron information is going to be in the upper left-hand corner. We see that patron name, we see their card tier, their patron ID, patron photo, and then the signature that you're going to get from their driver's license is going to be here, where we see no photo, no signature. We have the bank name. That's what's going to be attached to the marker. If they had multiple banks, we could hit the drop-down arrow and then assign the other bank to it. If we wanted to give a manual transaction number, we could by clicking on the manual box. In this particular case, Nicholas has no front money, so we can only issue from the credit amount, and this will issue a credit marker. So if we wanted to issue a marker for $1,000, we would simply type in 1,000. If we gave Nicholas cash, we would then put in to the cash pay field 1,000. This is primarily for reporting purposes, but you can force this to actually require an entry, or if you wanted chips, or if you guys use purchase vouchers, you can do purchase vouchers here. And then you'll see in the lower left-hand corner, it gives you the amount in words, 1,000 US dollars. That's going to go on the marker check that prints as well. Obviously, the marker is going to have the amount on it. So you click issue marker. It's going to print your marker, the receipt. I think you guys might have a trifold standard, however your marker standard works. And now we have issued that $1,000 marker to Nicholas. You can see use credit markers up here at the top. We can see the available credit has gone down. I can show you again. Maybe we'll issue a $750 marker. This one will go out in chips. Why not? Issue marker. Prints that marker receipt. We can do another one for 500. 500. Now Nicholas has 3 outstanding markers. What happens next? Nicholas goes and plays. In Nicholas' case, ideally he hopes that he wins so that he can then take his money, his winnings, come back, pay off his markers, and then leave with the winnings and have a happy day. So how would we then buy those markers back from Nicholas? We would go to the buyback tab. We see our 3 markers here. We see where they were issued from, issue date, marker number. We see the amount. Was it front money or was it credit? Anything outstanding? You guys are going to allow patrons to partially pay back their markers. We see the hold date here. So this is 30 days from today. which is this date here, our gaming date. So we have 8/19. Then we see the status is an issued. So the marker has just been issued. We see status date 7/20, and then who actually issued that marker, what user. Now, if you want to pay back a marker, you would have to click on the select checkbox. So in this particular case, you would then put how you are paying back the marker using these fields here. You guys aren't going to allow checks, I believe, so this information won't be selectable and usable. You'll have cash buy, chip buy, and the front money buy, and then other buy options. In this case, like other buy could be traveler's check or something along those lines, cashier's check. If you actually allowed that, you could put that in here and account for that here. In this particular case, if Nicholas went gambled, won, wanted to pay off the full amount of the marker in cash, he could do so. We hit the tab button. This will record this, that he paid it back in cash, and then we simply have to click on the accept buyback. This will then print that receipt, and there is no amount outstanding on that marker. So that marker drops off our buyback tab and now would reside on the history tab. The history tab has all our markers that were issued, and then the status of markers. This marker is in the buyback status. Currently, it's been bought back. So our only other options for this one are to actually revert it back to issued if you wanted to, or then reprint that receipt for the buyback. These reprints on outstanding markers will actually reprint the marker itself. So you guys may, instead of just reprinting the marker because it's a legal check, actually want to come here to void that marker and then just reissue the marker. But that is on your procedures and how you want to operate. From the history tab with markers, you could actually deposit that marker early by just selecting on the marker from the actual history tab and then clicking on the deposit button. And that would put that marker into a deposited status. And then you guys could actually then go ahead and deposit that marker. If the patron had requested to, hey, just deposit the marker, I lost. You don't need to wait 30 days. You could update that status from here by just selecting that marker and then clicking the deposit button. And now this marker has been out for deposit or is now in the deposit status, and you can feel free to go ahead and deposit it. If you need to revert, you can. And if you want to see all this defaults to showing you the last 90 days, if you want to see all, you would simply click the show all. If you just want to see the last 90 days, you can click just to see the last 90 days. You could also put a marker on hold from here, and then it would be literally on hold, and it would not then hit the markers for deposit form to be mass deposited. But a nicer way, maybe instead of putting the marker on hold, if you just wanted to extend the hold date, is you could go back to the buyback tab, click into the hold date. Hold on, let me select it, click into the hold date, and now you can literally change the hold date for the marker from here. Brings up our calendar. Maybe we want to get them until the end of August. We select August, we select OK. And now we've updated that hold date for when this marker is going to show up on our markers for deposit form. You can also consolidate markers. Let me issue another marker here, or 700. Issue marker, receipt prints. We go back to buyback. If we select on both of these, you can hit the consolidate button and this will create a new marker. It will keep the same issue date as the oldest marker. So a person can't take out a series of markers and then keep pushing that hold date farther and farther out. You can have it set up where it keeps the hold date tied to the initial issue date of the earliest issued marker, which is a nice feature. Then we confirm the bank account, and now that 700 and that 500 have been consolidated into a new $1,200 marker. You can buy back multiple markers at a time if you'd like. Let me show you that. Let's issue another marker. Again, we simply go back to the issue tab, put in our credit amount, put in our cash pay amount, click issue marker. In this particular case, we want to buy back multiple markers. We just have to select multiple markers. We want to do a cash buy of, let's say, $1,300. Now we have the button here at the bottom, partial pay down will not print new marker. So if you want to leave it as the same marker and then the outstanding balance, let me show you that as part of this. So we're going to just pay back $300 let's make it even. We're going to pay back $200 of this $1,200 marker. You can select it where it will not print a new marker and you'll have just the same marker number and it'll just say that the outstanding balance is $1,000 now instead of $1,200. So I can click accept buyback. It's going to print that receipt. And now we have an outstanding balance of $1,000 on that new marker. But if you want a new marker number entirely for a partial pay down, you can do that as well. We did 500, and then we clicked this checkbox. It actually printed a new marker. We have to click the checkbox to not print the new marker. I'm so sorry. So now that we have the checkbox clicked, it will not create a new marker. We'll keep the same marker and it will just show us our outstanding balance. I wondered why it printed twice. So now you see that we have an outstanding balance of 500. So our buyback tab is going to show all our markers with an outstanding balance on them, no matter what status they're in. If a marker goes into return status, this is deposited. If we return this marker, which we can here by going to the history tab and then selecting returned, reason for returned, insufficient funds, IF, not enough. I can't really spell insufficient right now, I'm sorry. Not enough funds, okay. We need approval. Great. I guess we won't be putting this into the return status. That would be how you would put a marker into return status. What does it say? Cage manager. Let me just give myself access to that role. Again, this is our training instance, so everyone is using this and testing it and creating approvals and permissions. We have our Nicholas. Let's go back to history. We select this deposited marker. We could either say the marker cleared, as in the funds were sufficient and didn't clear, or it didn't. I just want to show you what happens when you return. You'll get the alert notification that the patron credit status was suspended because their marker was returned. They still can buy back their markers though. You'll notice this returned one, if they wanted to, they could indeed buy it back. They could buy back their other markers. If they wanted to buy back multiple at once, they could do so. Clicking on the markers, you see there's 2,000 outstanding. How do I know that? It shows in the marker amount that's grayed out. So if they come in, they can buy it back. We hit accept buyback, and now both of those markers have been bought back. Now that we've issued all these markers, the whole date has come and gone, and now we need to deposit these markers. I know we've kind of covered a lot on markers here. Are there any questions so far on how to issue a marker, how to use the buyback tab to buy back a marker, how to use the history tab to either deposit an issued marker or to revert a transaction or to actually put a marker into return status. You notice this marker that is in return status. If the patron says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've journaled funds over. There are now sufficient funds in that account," you could put that marker back into deposit status if you would like by clicking on the deposit button here, or you could put it into hold if you still want, or you could send it to write off from here. We also have the collection agency. This is where you can attach a collection agency note to an individual marker. So if you're using Alex's collections, handling this marker, you could do so, and then you can save a note. And so you could have collections agencies if you're using those. I'm not sure how you're going to go about collecting on your markers if a marker goes unpaid. But there is the nice collection agency note feature that we do have. So you can kind of record which collection agencies are handling which markers. But after you've issued and bought back all your markers, when you want to deposit your markers, we have the markers deposit form. So the markers form is what you use to issue and buy back. Markers deposit is the form you would use. This shows you all of your markers that are beyond their hold date that are up for deposit. So you can print the report to show all this, or when you hit update status, it will tell you that these 11 markers for a total amount of $19,700 will now switch from the issued status to the buyback status. So you can mass update all of your markers using the markers deposit form. So I'm going to hit update status. It's going to print out the markers deposited report. We see all of those markers. We even see the return marker on this report for today as well. And then for this current gaming day, 7/20. Again, if we want to save a PDF, we can hit the PDF. If we want to export to CSV, we can do so with this, or save a CSV. If we want to print it, we can print it here, or we just close it. So the markers deposit form is what you use to mass deposit your markers. But again, you can go into each patron account individually. Here's what I was talking about, the mandatory read note. This patron has a new club card. There are several mandatory read notes. I know that because of the sidebar here and how small the scroller is on that. But again, I have to click OK before I can actually access the form. So I click OK. I get the patron credit status has been suspended. If I want to reactivate it, the only way to do so is to go to patron tracking, patron credit. I love that mandatory read. We'll now notice that Nicholas, his credit status is suspended. I would have to then from here change it back to active, hit the save button. Now he has active credit status again, and we can continue issuing him new markers. The last form within markers we want to talk about is return markers. This is where you would go. We have Nicholas. We have that marker that's in return status for this particular patron. This is where you can then change that status to collections. So you can either hit collect marker from here or redeposit marker. So if all else has failed and Nicholas told you he is not paying, this is where you would go to change that status from return to collect. So I just select the marker, I hit the collect marker button, and now that marker status has been changed to collect. We can go to the history tab. We see that status. We see our collect marker is here. We have our buybacks and our consolidated. But much like any marker, whether it's in return status, has been partially buyback, if there's an outstanding balance on a marker, you can always buy it back and have the patron can always pay it off. Nicholas can come in. He says, "Oh, I've seen the error of my ways. I want to pay off this marker. I love you guys. I'm so sorry." He gives you the $750 in cash, or he can even do a partial pay down. We accept that, prints the receipt, and now that marker that was in collections has been bought back. And again, mandatory read. Nicholas has an active credit status, so it does allow us to issue him markers. The next, are there any questions on markers, guys? Are you gonna be issuing markers from the cage for slot players?
Yes.
Okay, and so this is the form you would use to do that. It's cage and vault markers. The pit will be able to issue their own markers and they'll transfer them to you guys. And those markers that are transferred will show up on your chip bank FC form. Just so you're aware, marker transfers. They'll show up there and you'll accept the transfer. And then, they'll attach the patron account. And so a patron can come in and pay off their table game marker as well through the buyback tab. The next day after it's been transferred to you guys.
Yeah, they'll probably transfer them immediately. I don't think they're gonna redeem markers in the pit.
Okay, so then those will show up on your chip bank FC, and you'll have to make sure to accept all those marker transfers before you roll the shift or roll the gaming day at 4 a.m. I believe that's the time you guys roll the gaming day.
It is. So
Okay, awesome.
just a question while you're talking about rolling the shifts. Like right now, we have to roll the shift after day after swing, and then we roll it when we roll the gaming day. So we're just gonna have to roll it like just once then.
I believe so. Let me check with Terrence with you on that.
Okay.
But typically, how we set it up is you just roll it once a day, and you don't
Okay.
have the 3 different shifts, so it makes your job a little easier.
What about the chip bank? Because we actually have to roll the chip bank from shift to shift because they actually have to make sure that the chips they have match the system.
For that, I can find out for you, but so the chips in the chip bank have to exactly match because we do have our chip
Right.
inventory forms.
Right.
And then for your chip bank,
Closers right now. So when we open the chip bank and when we close the chip bank, the closer has to
oh,
match what we're ending with.
okay. So that would be like on your chip bank, you have the JPCC buy, so you would know your fills that went out. On the actual detail report, it will show. Let me see 1 second. Let me bring up that detail report again. Because you may need to do that via performing the buy. I don't see the fill on here. Hold on. I'm gonna need to investigate that a little bit more for you. Um, so typically what you would do, but I do want to double check, is we have our chip inventory form. And so at the start of your shift, you'll select your chip bank per se, and then you'll have the amounts in there, and then you'll verify that with what you physically have, and then you can save the count. And then at the end, you again save your count, and then you can verify that, okay, you had your inventory at the start of the shift, you have your fills and credits paperwork, and now you have your current inventory. And so you could use the chip bank FC form in that way, where you have, okay, we have $1,025 chips. Oh, this isn't, sorry, this isn't cash amount. You might have something more like 100,000. That might be a lot of chips, but, and so you could verify it that way, but let me double check to see the best way for verification. I believe it's going to be through the chip inventory form that'll have the inventory from the last count of that chip bank. And then you'll have all your table game fill and credit requests for the chips that went out and came in, and your table jackpots. If you guys then send out casino chips for your table jackpots, you'll have those as well, those slips to balance against. But let
Okay.
me do a little more digging on that,
Okay.
if you will. The last form I wanted to talk about was front money. And so you guys will be utilizing front money, I believe. In this case, patron comes in. Front money works different than safekeeping, where whatever they put in is just what they have in. So if he does $1,000, it doesn't matter the denomination. If Nicholas does, you can see he currently has zero balance, zero front money markers outstanding. Again, we have that manual box to use a manual transaction number. If you had a separate log or separate printed receipts, we're working from the deposit tab to deposit front money. We have to put in the amount. You may only have one or two fields, maybe US dollars and then casino chips. If you accept casino chips in your front money account, we would click to add. And now when we go to hit that accept button to confirm that deposit, we'll see our total and we'll see our closing balance. Then we have the amount of the closing balance in words. So we can hit accept. This is going to print out that receipt. Now Nicholas has $1,000 on his front money balance. You can either do the withdrawal from here using the redemptions tab, and you can withdraw it in any way, shape, or form. If he wants US dollars back out, if he wants casino chips, you can withdraw on casino chips. $500. You will need to click the click to add to bring it over to the save currencies so that this will then come out. You'll know what's being withdrawn because you'll see the total and the closing balance here. You would print slip much like you do for safekeeping. Yes, redemption is okay. Prints receipt. When we go to the history tab, again, we can see specific number of days and then click show, or we can just hit show all. We see our front money deposit, and then we see the withdrawal. It just uses the $1 denom, as that's how it's set up, because you don't need to use the exact denom in as denom out with front money. If you wanted to withdraw all of the front money, you could simply click the close front money button. So if at the end of Nicholas's trip, he's about to go home, he wants all his money back, instead of going through the redemption and then actually putting in $500, you can just simply click the close front money button to very rapidly um, effectuate or to very rapidly do that withdrawal. The other thing I wanted to then show you, now that Nicholas has front money, if we go back to markers, Nicholas can take out a front money marker. You'll now notice the front money field is no longer grayed out. So if we want to do a $400 front money marker in cash, you can do that as well instead of issuing it. This may be more convenient or might more happen at the table. Typically what happens is the patron would come, deposit the $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 in front money, and then just start taking that front money at the table as they're gambling on blackjack or craps or whatnot. But you can issue front money markers here. I just want to issue it from here so I can show you how to pay it off. So when that front money marker is issued at the table and it's transferred, it might say BJO1 here in the location. You literally pay it off through the front money buy tab on the actual buyback tab. You know how we have cash, chip, other buy. When you do the front money and then you type in the 400 and pay it off, it will then debit it from the front money account. We know there's 500 in the front money account. We've used 400. Here, let me hit cancel. Let me select here. We're going to pay that front money marker back from the front money account. And so everything will wash. So I'll hit accept buyback. And now it's going to debit the front money account, that $400 from that $400 front money marker. When we go back to front money, we now see that there's only $100 balance available. If I hit the close front money button, it says this operation will withdraw all remaining front money from the patron's account. Do you wish to continue? Yes. Receipt prints, front money has been withdrawn. The other nice thing is you will see that patron's photo and their signature from their driver's license will appear here. If I bring up our fan favorite, Tony Stark, We see his photo, the signature would go here as well, and you'll see that balance. So train your staff to make sure they either clear when they first load this form so that the patron followed them, is deleted or is cleared from the form so they bring up the appropriate patron, and then they simply just swipe that card, and then it'll bring up that patron, swiping the card through that card reader. Tony Stark shows up here. If you need to void a previous transaction, you could with the void button. If you need to revert that void, you would hit the revert button. Exact same as safekeeping. The major difference is that any money you deposit can come out however you want it. You don't have to have the denominations in exactly matching the denominations out. And that's kind of everything I have. I could show you checks if you want to see what checks look like. The checks form operates pretty much exactly the same as the markers form, where you have the bank account and the amount, and then if you're cashing the check or not. You aren't gonna be cashing checks through Synchros, right? You're gonna be using Every?
Right now we do both. So
Oh,
I do
okay.
not want to do it through Synchros when we move forward. I want to move everybody to Every, but that's really not up to me. So go ahead and show us so that way we know how to do it.
Okay. Much like your markers form with the checks, it goes against your credit line. So if you cash a check, let's just say amount on the check, $2,500. We have that. We are going to cash pay Tony 2,500. If you were using chip pay, you do that. If you were using slot vouchers here, you would then write down the check number on the actual check. We'll just say 6381. The check hold date, if you wanted to manually adjust it, you could do that here by clicking on this tile. Typically, though, you want to cash those checks right away. If you guys were using payroll checks, you can click this radio button. If it were a counter check, meaning that they didn't physically have the check available and they were just using kind of like a blank check that you would get at a bank counter, you would select that, and then Synchros would give it a check number or transaction number. Otherwise, you would simply hit cash check. Now it's going to bring the details for you to confirm them, the check number, the check amount, the whole date. You would hit accept. It's going to print out that receipt for you. And now that check is on deposit. One nice thing you can have is you can see a sample of that individual check if you saved a picture of that check. You can also sort by payroll checks, individual payroll companies, or just personal checks for Tony. If that bank account had a credit image attached, you could see that here. Same with a payroll check. We also have the buyback history and then buy slip. Buy slip would be to send these over to the main bank to get cash back for all the checks you'd cashed if you needed to. The buy back tab is where you could go. You have to hit the checks button, but much like how you buy back your markers, you could buy back checks in the same way if you allow that. Typically, people don't, or operators don't allow checks to be bought back. Do you guys allow a patron to buy back a personal check they just cashed with you?
We do.
Okay, so if they do, you would simply select the check here and then say what currency they bought back the check with. And then you would hit accept buyback, or from here you could void that check if you wanted to. But much the same way, you select the check, you select how much they're buying back for. If you do allow partial buybacks, some people do not. But if you don't, so then you'd have to put in the full amount, which would be here, this check amount in gray. Make sure that the money you're putting in matches that. We have our total here. We hit the accept buyback button. And now that check goes into buyback status. Again, much like with markers, we have the history tab and we can see our checks. One thing you cannot do with checks that you can do with markers is deposit the check ahead of the hold date. So with markers, we could change the status to deposit. With checks, we have to actually wait. And then much like with markers, with the checks, you have the check deposit form. What you can do though, which is nice, is when a check has exceeded the hold date or gone beyond that hold date, you can have Synchros auto deposit that check for you. If you guys are depositing checks same day, you can set up Synchros to auto deposit those personal checks for you, so you don't have to come to this form and actually hit the update status button. But if you weren't doing that, this is where you could come. This is where you have to come to actually update the status on those checks into from issued to buyback. So here I hit update status, much like with markers. Instead of marker deposited report, it's going to show your the checks deposited report. You can print this out if you need to, or save as PDF, or save as a CSV file. I'm going to hit the close button to close this out, but as you can see in the support, it shows you the current status deposited, patron ID, patron name, bank account number, check amount, receive date. This one was received on June 20th. And then gaming date. So we know the calendar date and the gaming date, and then the hold date. It all shows up here on the checks deposited report. You can also run that report separately if you wanted to, but it automatically runs when you update the deposit status on your checks or markers to make them go to the deposit status. So if we go back to checks, we also have return checks, much like we do with return markers. If there were any checks that were returned, we could update them to collection status from this form, from the return check form. But when we go back to our checks form, and let's bring up a new patron. What's that? Let's go. Okay, that wasn't right. Okay, this particular patron, Nezuko, had checks deposited, so we can go to the history tab. We see now that these checks are set for deposit or in the deposited status. So if we wanted to actually change them to return status, we could. We simply highlight the check, hit the return button, enter a reason. And we see check return complete. Now when we go to that return checks, patron follows us. This is a stop code. It's just a warning. We see that the patron has had their credit status suspended. So Synchros will automatically suspend a patron credit status whenever a check or marker goes and has a status updated to be returned. On here, if we want to send to collections, we can. If we want to redeposit, we can. Exactly the same as markers. So we can say collect check. Now it's off to collections. We now see that status is updated to collections. We still can pay those checks off. In this case, since it's in collections, we can decide to buy that check back. We put in cash payment or chip payment or other payment if you have set up, and then you hit the accept payment in the lower right-hand corner. It's going to print our receipt, and now that check is going to buyback status. Again, it hasn't been deposited, it's been literally bought back. So that is what the buyback status means. We can go back to checks in case you see that. So for a particular patron, credit status suspended. Again, the only way to change credit status once it's been suspended is go to patron tracking, patron credit with that patron. And from the drop down, changing that from suspended to active, click and save. Nice feature, we can see available credit, available checks used, total available credit, available markers, TTO, from the patron credit form. Checks. We have our patron, patrons follow us. I guess it did not update the credit status. Active, save. Oh, consolidated W2G. more testing stuff we do. If you guys were using Consolidated W2G, you would set that up through the patron credit form as well. So we go to checks. Credit status back to active, so we can continue to issue checks and markers against that available credit line. So you can only issue a check of up to 49, or cash a check of up to $4,900 if allowed, based on the $4,900 credit limit. So again, to cash a check, you put the check amount, you put in cash pay or chip pay, you would have to enter a check number, and then you would hit the cash check button. It's going to ask you to confirm those check details, patron name, bank account, check number, check amount, and then print your receipt for you. Any questions on cashing checks or depositing checks, or the fact you can set up the auto deposit feature so that every time a check exceeds the hold date, the Syncros will automatically set the status from issued or received. Checks are received, markers are issued, from received to deposited automatically for you. Any questions on checks? And we have our checks for deposit, and then our return checks form, all very similar to how markers function and how those forms work. Any other questions at all?
I do have one question. So when markers go for deposit, do we have to
Yes.
physically go in and print that report every day, or can that be automated where it prints every day?
You can set up batch reporting. I'd have to find out if that is one of the ports that prints, but in order to deposit markers, you have to come to the markers deposit and then hit update status, and then it'll automatically print the report for you.
Okay, so we basically have to manually do it every day then.
Yeah, for markers, yes. You can't auto deposit markers in our system. We do have the markers for deposit report as well that you can run. So if you individually deposited a marker, you would then go and run the markers deposited report, and it'll tell you all the markers deposited on that gaming day. And we have that report. So yeah, you can set up batch reporting. You can talk to IT, but you still have to manually deposit those markers yourself every day.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Do you have any other questions on
No.
anything else?
Mm-mm.
Okay. That's everything I have for you guys. Hopefully you learned a lot, and we will be doing further training on property before go live, and we will have people in the cage with you, working side by side with you if you have any other questions or as issues arise, to help make this a smooth and seamless go live and transition from your old system to Syncros. So if you don't have any other questions, that's all the information I have for you today. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and then stop the recording.